Hello, friends, and welcome to another installment of the Worship Pastor Perspective. Today, we have our first question and response to something that we talked about last week. So, my buddy Ryan writes in and he asks this, in case you see me looking up a lot of the time, my notes are above the screen here. So, Ryan writes this. He says, I had a coffee sipping moment you mentioned happen this past week in worship. Strange feeling and kind of a letdown on my end, although I won't know for sure what they were thinking or feeling. In their defense, it was during a new song to their church. Can you do a video on how to encourage the congregation to come with you on the musical journey every week for worship? So we had talked about last week, sometimes you'll be leading worship and you'll be it's such a beautiful, passionate moment. And you might even close your eyes and you're pouring your heart out to God in the Holy of Holies, and you think everyone is with you and everyone has arrived, and then you look up and you have that one person or maybe several people that are out there with their coffee and they're just kind of sipping it and they're observing you like you're an insect of some kind. We've all had that moment. We've all had those times when we ask ourselves, well, why aren't they as into this as I am? Why aren't they grabbing a hold of this moment? This is a special time. And so how do we engage the crowd? How do we engage the congregation to authentically engage in worship, and to what degree? It really depends on a lot of things. So I've got a couple of initial responses to that, and just based on my experience and my tradition, so I'm certainly sure that lots of you are going to have more to add to this, and I would encourage you to add to it in the comments section here below the video. So first of all, if you're talking about a new song, it's understandable that people aren't going to be immediately jumping on it unless it's a really simple song or maybe a song that they've heard on the radio a bunch. Typically what I will do is I will spend some time teaching it to them. A matter of fact, this last weekend, we learned a new song off the new Hillsong United album called Shadow Step. And Shadow Step is kind of a challenging song. It's not easy. There's several different sections to it, and the melody isn't super simple and accessible, so it's going to take a little bit of work. So I spent about 2 minutes framing the song, what it was about, what Shadow Step meant, and then actually teaching the chorus of the song to them and asking them to sing that chorus. So we actually ran the chorus a couple of 2 or 3 times, and we had fun with it. We joked around about it. And if you want to see how I did that, you can go to westsidefamilychurch.com, click the watch button, and you can look for this last weekend. And you can see at least how one guy teaches a chorus to a song to engage the crowd. But the nice thing is after you run through that a couple of times, they have a tendency to be a little bit more loose and to be a little bit more engaged, even on a brand new song. Another thing just to understand is when you're trying to be in tune with the room and in tune with the people that are going on, the outward appearance, in other words, their outward engagement, whether they are raising hands or eyes closed or whatever, isn't always the best indicator of what is truly going on in the spirit, what's truly going on in their hearts. There are times when I'm in a congregation and the most engaged, most holy moment for me is I might have my head down and my hands on the chair in front of me. And I'm afraid that, if a worship leader were looking at me, he might think that I'd tuned out or fell asleep or something like that, when the truth is that was my best moment. So we have to be cautious not to just assume that that physical posture is the ultimate litmus test for what's going on. And I think we have to learn how just to love the people where they are. Some folks, they don't always connect in the most musical, expressive way. If you've ever read a book by Gary Thomas called Sacred Pathways, he talks about people have a tendency to head towards certain sacred pathways where they connect with God. It might be a naturalist and might encounter God in nature or intellectually or aesthetically or viscerally. There's all these different ways that people have a primary way of connecting with God in worship, and it isn't always that enthusiast pathway of the weekend, corporate, everyone in it together. So in a way, we kind of have to let them off the hook, that they don't always have to be in that place. And truthfully, some church cultures aren't as emotionally engaged or expressive as others. So we have to understand that. And that if you're from a charismatic tradition, you just might have built into your church culture a much more emotionally, outwardly expressive culture than, say, the Presbyterian church down the street. It doesn't mean that their worship is invalid, that it isn't authentic, but it is going to have a different outward expression that we have to be in tune with. So they're not always as emotionally expressive as others, and sometimes we just need to embrace that and love them precisely where they're at. I like to think of us worship leaders as it's like a restaurant, and we're the waiters at the restaurant, and we're there to set the table and invite people in. That the meal isn't about us, It isn't about even what we might want to eat, what we like, but about inviting them in, come and taste and see and know that the Lord is good. And you can't put a gun to somebody's head and ask them to worship. It has to be something that is authentic to them. We're not trying to get people to manufacture something. We're not trying to manipulate an emotional response from them. And at the same time, we are trying to set the table and invite them into something special, to remind them why they're there. Sometimes verbally, we just have to let them know, hey, you know what, you might have come here today and you're feeling far away. It was hard getting the kids in the car. It was hard getting them checked in. It was, you got your coffee in hand and it was a miracle that you even got in the room. And I just want to let you know that right now, this is a space that's carved out for you, maybe over any other time during the week, where you can meet with God and settle in with Him and do this special thing as all these people together are going to express their worship to God and be of one heart and one mind and one thought just for a few moments. And there's something really beautiful and special about that. So we remind them of the why behind the what, that we worship God because He's worthy and for no other reason, because He is good and His love endures forever, because He is merciful and because He is kind and because He is present in our lives. We give them that verbal framework for why we do what we do, and then we encourage them and give them permission to do it. So there are lots of other things, there are lots of obstacles that we can remove from that experience, like styles of song, difficult melodies, maybe language that is hard to access, some practical ways for them to start to understand that this is a corporate experience. It's not a band and an audience. And sometimes people might perceive it. If you've got a stage or something, they might look at it as like, okay, well, this is almost, it looks like a concert like I go to where a band is performing, and we just kind of take all that in. And you have to be deliberate about breaking down that performance audience obstacle. You can do things like ask yourself, are they necessary to the experience? Do they feel necessary to the experience? Or do they feel like we're sort of worshiping for them? Or have they been literally, verbally invited in? Sometimes you just got to say, hey, today is the day. Now is the time. Incline your hearts towards God and let this be that moment where you push aside all the clutter and all the mess in your mind and in your heart and just be present in the moment. Sometimes we need to ask them to lead a portion of the song. I'll drop out and I'll say, hey, why don't you lead us with your voices right now, and ask them to, the band will cut out and they'll just sing, and I won't sing. I'll have the people on the stage stop singing, just so that they understand that they are necessary to the experience. We'll explain to them that this isn't a band performing you, but that we are all on the worship team. Matter of fact, you out there in the chairs, you are the most important part of the worship team. And the more that you pour into this and the more that you engage with it, the better it is for you and for all of us together. And you can use non-musical elements that require their response, or it's not gonna work. Like call and response kind of readings, liturgical elements, corporate prayers that require them to be actively engaged, or the thing literally doesn't happen. So I'm sure you can think of a lot more ways to do this, but I think the biggest thought here is this. Do we love them where they are and invite them to come on the journey with us? Actively, intentionally, and then allow them their own journey. Don't expect them to be someplace that they're not. So that's our first question and response. Thank you, Ryan, for putting that out there. He had something else we'll talk about next week. He talked about possibly make a video that talks about less being more musically, and how bands need to learn how to listen to one another. So until then, this is the Worship Pastor Perspective. I'm Troy. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and write your questions and comments and pushback and ideas in the comments below. Bless you guys. I'll talk to you later.